Good morning.
Good morning.
Hope you guys have had a great week here in Wilmington as we celebrate our July quarterly meeting. I know we've had a lot of fun. Last night was a lot of fun. Anyway, that's a very important thing. It's a conflict and are instructed to refrain from participating in any matter coming before this council with respect to which there is a conflict of interest or appearance of conflict. Conflict arises if you'll just let us know. Our secretary, wonderful.
Continue to be a faithful servant of the State Bar. We ask for a special blessing for our fellow Councilor Bert Kemp this morning. Wrap your loving arms around him and keep him safe and return him to us as soon as you possibly can in your wisdom. We ask for these blessings and others that we deserve. Let us all say, amen.
Amen.
Really appreciate you including Bert in that prayer as our thoughts and prayers go out to not only Bert but also his family. He has some young children. I just have to say cancer sucks. And I personally attest. I'd like to welcome some special guests with us this morning. First of all, I'd like to welcome Chief Justice Paul Newby and his wife Megan. And happy birthday again. Chief Justice Newby's staff, Liz Henderson, is here with us. Liz, raise your hand. She's waving back. We have with us this morning also the president of the North Carolina Bar Association, Clayton Morgan. Clayton. Past president, John Heil. John. We also have with us past president and former counselor, past president of the North Carolina Bar Association and former counselor, Shelby Fenton is here. Shelby. We also have past president of the North Carolina Advocates for Justice, Bill Powers is here. Bill. We have with us from raise your hand. We'd like to welcome all our special guests this morning. I would like to call upon Chief Justice Paul Newby to come up and give remarks. I want to let you guys know that we just had about an hour-long breakfast with Chief Justice Paul Newby, and the relationship that we've been building with the Chief Justice and the Supreme Court is one that we are extremely grateful for, and we admire what you're doing, and we appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. Can I use this one?
That one's on.
Good morning, everybody. For the record, I will note that I was not the one who in any way prompted that this now statewide, should we say worldwide live stream is recognized. My wife had a birthday yesterday. I didn't do that. Maybe just to make the record clear. Today is actually a historic day. I got word from the administrative office of the courts that the last piece that we've been waiting for an incredibly long time, e-warrants, is going live statewide today. So that should mean, if everything else falls into place as it has been represented to us, it will, that within the next 120 days, we will have live pilot districts with e-courts. A day that many of us have waited for a very long time. It's an access to courts issue. As y'all know, I love to quote our state constitution, particularly Article 1, Section 18. Courts shall be open, and justice shall be administered without favor, without denial, without delay. Part of denial is a lack of access, and e-courts will help us address, at least in some way, that issue. Warrants impacts every law enforcement officer in the state as they are doing their due diligence encounters with the public with regard to let me ask you to convey to the members of the bar and General Assembly came to the Supreme Court, Chief Justice Burley Mitchell, and said, we got a problem. Why is justice delayed? And future Chief Justice Henry Frye to address the simple question of why do we have these problems with the length of time it takes for cases to be addressed? And are there standards? The Supreme Court, at the recommendation of Chief Justice Frye or Justice Frye and his commission, adopted standards. 75 to 90% of all cases should be disposed of, some in 180 days, all in 365 days. That was the standard that was adopted in 1996. To help with that, it was ordered that all districts were to adopt a continuance policy to fit their individual needs, but nonetheless, all would adopt continuance policies. Y'all want to guess how many continuance policies we found in our folders at the administrative officer courts that have been submitted by the districts? The answer would be 0, none. And so we have instructed, I have instructed all the senior residents to develop continuance policies for every judicial district. And we have incentivized that because at the largesse of the General Assembly, we were given a whole bunch of new positions. Deputy clerks, assistant clerks, court administrators, certainly a continuation of emergency funding to bring in emergency sessions of court to address backlogs. And we've incentivized the production of these continuance policies with saying with regard to how cases are going to be continued. Justice without delay is a constitutional requirement, and we got to figure out how we can do that better. Our court, the administrative office of courts, is looking at the timelines that have been established. measuring performance. In keeping with that, I'm instructed that in January, beginning January 2023, all the Superior Court judges are going to stay home that spring to address backlogs. We have found that it's much more efficient to keep the Superior Court judges at home to ensure that cases are being addressed. And as we all know, most cases are going to settle. As a matter of fact, the last statistics that I saw, 99% of cases settle. But they generally settle after a case is put on a calendar where people really, really, really believe the case is going to be tried. So hopefully through several approaches, we can be very proud that we in North Carolina are administering justice without delay. I continue to be very concerned about mental issues in our profession, particularly post-COVID, and I encourage all of us to be diligent. Also, we are looking at a variety of ways that we can address mental health issues and substance abuse issues across our culture. We have some opioid settlement funds that we're hoping that we can use for recovery courts. I continue to believe that recovery courts are a very good way to address some of these problems. I mean, just think about every person that we're able to take out of our justice system and that person recovers. There's countless victims that will not be victims. There are so many other benefits that this person, instead of sitting in a prison somewhere, is now a productive member of society. They're able to be a part of their family, raising children, all the other things that go along with it. So I'm hearing good reports of the different counties that have recovery courts, and I will continue to go to the General Assembly and seeking some state funding. And as we get more and more folks, this is a good idea. Same thing with family courts, same thing with public defender systems. It seems to me that these are some good approaches that we need to continue to expand. Continue to ask y'all as you have ideas about how to help with professionalism in our practice. Please pass those ideas along. I'm not smart enough to figure it all out. We love ideas, and one of the things that we're doing with our professionalism group is we are recognizing the unsung heroes of the courthouse. We are giving awards, professionalism awards, to deputy assistant clerks, to bailiffs, to magistrates, those that are showing day in, day out the respect of others who come into their spheres of influence. We are recognizing them. It's a statewide nomination process. This is the first year, and we're giving them a cash recognition. We have met great excitement with that, and hopefully that's incentivizing for all of us in the courthouses to treat others the way we would like to be treated. Like I said, the General Assembly has been very generous with the judicial branch. They didn't fund everything we asked for, but they gave us a great deal of additional funds, additional positions. And in addition to that, as we look at over the last 2 years, our judicial employees have gotten either a 6 or 7% increase in their salaries. We're doing what we can to enhance other state benefits with regard to paying for parking in areas that has been a challenge for our judicial branch employees as well as state bar duties. So again, we are blessed to get to do what we do to ensure that justice is administered without favor, denial, delay. That's what all of us do. And I just want to thank you, and I hope you'll convey that to the attorneys with whom you practice, how much we appreciate all their efforts as we meet our constitutional mandate of equal justice for everybody. Thank you.
Chief Justice, I had the privilege of going to the Court Reporters Conference in Concord and being present for one of those professionalism awards that he mentioned. And you can see the change of the mood in the room whenever Mel Wright gave that professionalism award to one of the court reporters, sort of an unsung hero in our court system a person that doesn't get a lot of credit. Who does a very important thing for us. So I think those awards have been really, really well received, and I can tell that those court reporters really appreciate it. So great program. I'd like to next recognize Clayton Morgan, the president of North Carolina Bar Association, for his first address to the State Bar Council. Welcome, Clayton.
So much, President Jordan, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Our fiscal year ended for the Bar Association this past June and for the foundation. So just wanted to spend a few minutes to give you an update on kind of what we did last year and what we hope to do this year. Starting with the annual fund, we had another great year for the foundation's annual fund. We surpassed $500,000 in donations, which is really a testament to our legal community and having faith in what we do and the program that we put on. So we're very happy with that. In prior addresses to this body, the prior president, John Howe, gave you an update on what was going on with the foundation's task force on grant recognition and initiatives. That task force concluded its work in June. The board of directors of the foundation approved all those recommendations, and they really focused around redefining our justice funds and how those are displayed in the proper context, and also how we can re-engage members and educate them on future justice fund nominees, and the development of a diversity, equity, inclusion justice fund. So that task force was headed by Tammy Strager Truist, and all the recommendations were unanimously approved. So that was good. Pro bono. We had a great year for pro bono. Our 4-All Service Day, once again, was held virtual this past March, but it was a resounding success. We fielded about 7,400 calls. We had over 350 volunteers from the attorney side, and also a lot of paralegal and law school student volunteers. And so, say today, the biggest areas, unless you were a volunteer, you don't know this, but the biggest areas were estate planning, family law, and real property. We got a lot of questions from those, and we hope to have it probably hybrid next year if we can, if things hold up. But if not, the virtual option has proven to be very valuable. We continue to be inspired by the number of attorneys who are stepping up, at your home and your office and whatnot, to help us all out. So stay tuned for that. March 3rd, 2023, save that date for the 16th annual 4-All Service Day. Other initiatives, the Housing Stability Pro Bono Project. That was one where we really had a partnership with Pro Bono Resource Center. And we had about 773 referrals that came through that project. Of those, we're happy to report that about 120 resulted in a landlord and a tenant agreement to keep the partnership, the tenant here. Over 500 attorney volunteers signed up on our website. They filled about 1,500 questions last year. And we put on 5 basically power hour programming throughout the year. A lot of participation. Wheels for Heroes led the way as we always do. It seems like our volunteers stepped up to help our first responders. We had 12 Wheels for Hero clinics in 9 counties, from Wake to Montgomery to Durham, Wayne. A lot of counties saw the benefit of attorneys in those areas stepping up to help our first responders. So we're really happy about that. The last item I wanted to talk to you about was our annual meeting first one in 3 years that was held in person in June in Winston-Salem. A lot of you were here attending that as well. We thank you for your support. We had a symposium at that annual meeting. It was comprised of 3 panels and it focused on judicial independence. So in advance of that symposium, the Bar Association committed for discussion. And the polling focused around judicial independence, and it focused on two groups: attorney groups and voters, non-attorney groups. So in case you've already accessed the YouTube, share a few data points that were used by the panelists to really magnify some of the issues that they were. Trust in the North Carolina court system. Thought this would be a benefit to this body. 82% of the attorneys polled had a great deal or fair amount of trust in the North Carolina court system. 82%, that's wonderful. On the voter side, the non-attorney side, 52% felt like they had that same level of trust. In the North Carolina appellate courts, 79% of attorneys had a great deal of fair amount of trust in our appellate court system, so that's also wonderful. And the voters held constant at 51%. On the area of judicial selection, whether voters and attorneys wanted to have an appointment process or to vote, the results were as follows. 37% of attorneys favored appointment by state government, and only 12% of voters favored appointment. When it came to elections, 52% of attorneys favored elections, 8 out of 10 voters favored elections. So we look at that as a whole. The voters, 8 out of 10, want to go to the polls. Attorneys, slightly more than the majority, feel the same way. Across the board between attorneys and non-attorneys. 76% of attorneys favored nonpartisan elections, and 71% of voters favored nonpartisan elections. So I encourage you to pull up the YouTube channel and look at the 3 panels in total context, and you'll see more metrics that are on the screen as well as those panels spoke. And please, the 3 panels focus on different.
We appreciate your partnership with the State Bar and our relationship. I think it benefits lawyers all over the state of North Carolina to have that relationship with you guys. I'd like to next recognize Shelby Benton for the IOLTA Award report.
I know y'all always wonder, well, what is she going to do next, right? Well, it's IOLTA board. So you've seen me as a counselor, you've seen me as a Bar Association president, and I've been lucky enough for the past 3 years to serve on the IOLTA board. And I've been the vice chair this past year with Mary Irvine expecting a child in October. She did join you guys earlier this week, but to make the trek back down here was a little easier for me to come rather than her. So if you'll bear with me a little bit, thank you so much, President Jordan, for allowing IOLTA to make a report to the counselors today. We always believe that it's so important that you get an update and have a little extra understanding about what the North Carolina Interest on Lawyers Trust Account program actually does. So I know lots of you know me, but there are some that we really don't know each other. And so I'm going to give you a little bit more information about IOLTA. You've got a full report in your materials. That's more detail. I won't go over all of that, but I do want to just give you some more information. Of course, due to the limited resources, only a fraction of people in North Carolina are able to afford lawyers, and we are in the civil legal needs area and space. And what we do, we are the philanthropic arm of the State Bar. We work directly with lawyers and financial institutions to set up interest on lawyers' trust accounts, and then we take those funds and make grants to the civil legal aid community. We want to make sure, as you do, that the citizens of North Carolina have access to justice. You've heard the Chief Justice talk about that. You've talked about it in your meetings all week long, and that is where lawyers, all of you with your trust accounts, have made a really big difference in the state of North Carolina. And the goal is, of course, to allow the citizens to have an opportunity to be represented by lawyers for those who do not have the equal opportunity to do that financially. So since the program's inception, the first gave grants out in 1984, we have given out $105 million in grants. You should give yourselves a hand about that, because that's what you and others in your communities have been able to do through that program over these now 38 years. The trustees met in June. We reviewed all of our grant policies and criteria. We've tweaked some things, and we've now taken all of those and put them into one place, so that it wouldn't be on 2 or 3 different places for the people applying for grants to find out what they need to do in order to get a grant from us. And so we hope that all of that will be together and ready to be available to everyone who will be applying for grants. We expect our grant information to be set out probably the first week in August. We will send it to every single counselor, and we would ask you to please get that information out to the nonprofits in your communities that provide free legal services, that they can then review that information. We'll have host some sessions where people can find information through the board. Also, our staff will be available to anyone who hasn't already applied for a grant, doesn't know how we do it. So you'll be able to get them information in order to make an application to us. Our staff will be available in many different ways as they need it. We have a sort of short period. We'll go August through mid-September or so, and then always before the 1st of October, we'll have closed season, because we're in December and get those back to the state board to know about those. And so we'll want to get that all done as quickly as we can, and we need your help to get the information out. As you know, this past season has been a little bit different. We were coming pretty gangbusters on the interest that was coming in. By the last quarter of 2021, the interest was a little bit lower. Some institutions had lowered their rates with us. Additionally, they had added some service charges. We did have some negotiations with various institutions to try to quench some of the problems that we were having on that end, and we had some success with that. As you know, the feds have raised the interest rate 25 basis points in March. They went up again in June. They're expected to go up throughout the rest of this year. To that end, we have been having email as well as conversations with financial institutions to make sure they remember that they have an obligation to make sure the interest they pay on the lawyer's trust account is comparable to what they give to other types of accounts like that to other individuals. And so for you, as you think about who you bank with, it's important that you consider how much interest they may pay on your trust account, because that is a way that you are helping fund civil legal needs across our state. And we have premier partners as well as benchmark partners that pay a higher than average amount. That's always published. It's in the paperwork you've got now, but it's also in the journal when it comes out. So if you'll pay attention to that, that's always very, very helpful. We have seen some uptick a little bit, but it usually takes a little while for us to reach that goal of getting back to where we were after we've had a little downturn. So what we know is last year, in 2021, we had our highest year ever. We collected $5.6 million in interest on lawyers' trust accounts in 2021. That's up from an all-time high in 2019 of $5.1 million. You'll see where we're tracking this year. We're a little bit lower, but we still had not finished the second quarter with the numbers that you've been provided right now. So we're hopeful and ambitious. A lot of be able to pass out on grants. The other thing that IOLTA has taken on is to try to be a convener of information across the civil legal aid community. We learned from the legal means assessment that there are some extreme gaps. I don't think much of that was a surprise, but at least it's there in a way that we can now talk about it. And with that information, IOLTA felt like one thing we could do as being a grant maker would be a convener of people. And so state on March Greensboro, and as a result of that convening of people, they have set up 4 working groups that have identified some of the things from the legal needs assessment that have been of particular importance and gaps. Those 4 working groups are family law, services to immigration and immigration populations, communications and outreach, and a coordinated intake. So these 4 working groups are going to work through the summer and hopefully come back with some real concrete recommendations that across the communities they can share their successes, they can share the things that are super difficult for them, and hopefully find ways that they could jointly move together versus everybody inventing the wheel by themselves. So we're really happy to be in that space to help convene those people together. So I hope what you take away from my conversation with you this morning, although I'm doing all the talking, sorry about that, that you'll go back and that we were able to give out, put some into reserves for the lean times we've all had in the past. And in addition to that, we are also trying to convene these groups of people together to have a thoughtful approach to how we render civil legal aid in North Carolina with the limited funding that we do have. And so we hope that you'll join with us and believe that what IOLTA is doing is helping make a difference, and that it is all being done with the support of all of you and all of the lawyers in your district, which ultimately is their clients' money, right? And so that means the citizens of North Carolina are helping the citizens of North Carolina. And so that marketing information needs to get out there because it makes a huge difference when people think about what they're doing and how they are. And they want to raise awareness of lawyers. We want to make lawyers have the reputations that we used to have, right? The thing we think about from 30 years ago when I first, 40 almost years ago when I first became a lawyer. This is one way that you can do it. So don't forget to think about that. And thank you.
After last night's presentation, it's hard to say this word, but I'm going to recognize Warren Savage, who will give the report of the LAP board. And don't you call me that name again.
Thank you very much. I have the honor of being most recent, one of the most recent board appointees to the LAP board, and I can't thank you enough for the support this organization gives with Lawyers Assistance Program. I hope if you don't already have it, that you all have it. The numbers for Nikki, Kathy, and with that in mind, I wanted to, I'm here only because Ted Edwards, who's the chair of the board right now, had a last minute something come up. Robin drafted me, sent me with a script. So Robin says, this past quarter at LAP has been very productive. They had a minority outreach conference in June at the McKimmon Center in Raleigh. That has become attended. The evaluations across the board were excellent. And this event, because of COVID, I guess, it was a couple of years in a row that we're not able to have the program in person. This is the first one in person, and so they did it in June, but they're getting back to do it in February coming up in 2023. We also, the lab board was one of five, the largest assistance program on the board, was one of 5 states who sponsored a women's conference in Roanoke, Virginia, or that is being scheduled in 2023 in Roanoke, Virginia. We've done this in the past. It's a collaborative effort with involving lab programs from North Carolina, Virginia, Kentucky, West Virginia, and Tennessee. The last one was held here in North Carolina in Asheville, and it was very popular. We had about 30 North Carolina women attend and actually got 2 referrals self-referrals out of that event. I encourage you, if you hadn't already done so, to listen to the Lawyers Assistance Program podcast. They have great guests. Not all. We also have a LinkedIn page, so go check that out. It has about 743 active cases. They opened 31 new files. Of those, the large majority are now and continue to be mental health and psychological issues. About 318 of them are substance abuse issues, 143 family and relationship issues, which if you didn't know that Lawyers Assistance helps folks that are dealing with that, I can tell you from personal experience. 13 process addiction issues, 32 medical percent of the members of our state bar. Really important program. Thank you very much. Nikki, please tell Robin I did all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you, Nikki, for the work you guys do. I hope you'll take that back to Robin and let her know that we really appreciate Robin and the staff. And not only is that Robin and the staff, Nikki and Catherine, but also the volunteers. It's a volunteer-driven agency. Very important. I want to next recognize Patrick Murphy and Elizabeth Foley to present the surrender of a license in this one.
Mr. President, I will recuse myself.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So note that.
Mr. President, Council, you have in your materials the affidavit tendering the surrender of the law license of Peter C. Anderson. Mr. Anderson was licensed to practice law in North Carolina on March 21st, 1992. Mr. Anderson misappropriated entrusted funds by withholding $54,024.67 from settlement proceeds that lawfully belonged to his prior law firm. I've examined the affidavit and it comports with the requirements of the rules. Accordingly, I recommend that the North Carolina bars and taxed for the costs.
Thank you. That needs a motion and a second. Does anybody have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. All right. Any discussion or questions of the Office of Council Representatives? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, I'd like to recognize Catherine Jean of the Office of Council for purposes of considering an unconditional reinstatement.
Thank you, Mr. President. In 2010, Jonathan McCollum was disbarred. In 2017, he sought reinstatement. The State Bar Council voted to grant conditional reinstatement. There were several conditions. He met 2 of them. He couldn't meet the third one. He needed time to meet the third one because the third one was the requirement that he enter into a LAP contract and that he comply with its terms. So he did enter into a LAP contract. That order says that his reinstatement will be conditional until LAP certifies that he has completed his program of recovery. LAP has now certified that Mr. McCollum has completed his course of treatment and has been discharged from LAP, and he has now filed a petition for unconditional reinstatement. I've reviewed the materials, find that he has in fact met the conditions that were imposed by the council, and the Office of Counsel has no objection to his being unconditionally reinstated to the practice of law. Mr. McCollum and his lawyer, Jeff Gray, are here if you have any questions of them, and I'd be also happy to answer any questions you might have.
Are there any questions with regards to this procedure? It requires a motion and a second with regards to the petition for unconditional reinstatement of Jonathan McCollum. Do I have a motion? I have a second?
Second.
All right, is there any discussion with regards to this? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? His compliance with LAP is confidential, and he had to give a waiver to do that. I don't want you to think that LAP automatically comes to the Office of Counsel. I think that's an important thing that our constituency needs to know, and I think LAP does a good job of trying to point that out. So thank you for that.
May I hand you this order?
Yes, ma'am.
And, I think I'm next up.
Yes, you are. So I will recognize Catherine Jean once again to give us a thorough report.
I've been asked to be exhaustive on this occasion. Actually, may I take this opportunity to introduce Jason to anyone?
Absolutely.
Before I give you my exhaustive report, I would like to introduce Jason White, who is our summer intern this summer. He also happens to be the son of our own Jay White, but that's not why he was hired. He actually was a really impressive candidate, and he's been a very, very good summer clerk. He's quite a bit more advanced in his legal education than you would expect a person who's a rising 2L to be. So he's very smart. He's been a great addition to our office, and he's going to be a fine lawyer.
Y'all welcome Jason.
Jason. Okay, and now I'm ready to give you my report. You have in your materials a report of the activities during the last quarter of the Office of Counsel, and I'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have about that. Hearing none, I will depart. Thank you so much.
Exhaustive comment on the Office of Counsel. We're going to take things out of order, even though it's on your agenda. We're going to call upon Todd Brown to give the report of the Issues Committee, and there's going to be a presentation. I'm going to step down so I can see the presentation, but Todd, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Issues Committee met on Wednesday and took up several items. I'll give you a brief report on those, and then we'll turn to the presentation. We first concluded the receipt of our report from the Regulatory Change Subcommittee. We started that in April and did presentation on the remaining recommendations of that subcommittee. The Issues Committee accepted the report and the presentation, and there's a recommendation that the matters that are contained in that report be referred to the newly established Access to Justice Committee, which we will talk about in a minute. That motion passed, and so we will be recommending that the Executive Committee proceed accordingly. The Issues Committee also took up the issue of whether the Access to Justice Committee should be an ad hoc committee, presently with the expectation that it will become a standing committee. And the pleasure of this Issues Committee was that we would ask the Executive Committee to recommend the establishment of an ad hoc Access to Justice Committee now, and that in the fall and October meeting, more than likely, Alice will bring to us the materials that we need to make that ad hoc committee a standing committee of the Bar of Life, Ethics, et cetera, et cetera. We then talked a little bit about legal deserts, and you'll get a presentation on that in a minute. The short answer is they are up and running. They're in the information gathering, education gathering phase, and are meeting with stakeholders. Brian will give you a presentation on that in a minute. We also received a very detailed, excellent report from Alice Mine on the work on the recommendations that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Subcommittee made at the April meeting, which this body approved, and which Alice is now working on. If you want any information on the details, please consult with Alice. Mr. President, back there. That concludes my report, and if it's your pleasure, I will turn it over to Brian for his presentation. Alice, do I have an action item that I need to recommend and need to vote on? I don't think so.
Well, either Executive Committee needs to make a motion to make the Access to Justice Committee a ad hoc committee.
Executive Committee to do that, yes.
All right, there's a recommendation from the Executive Committee that we establish an ad hoc committee for the Access to Justice until we can create language in October for a standing committee of the Access to Justice Committee. That coming as a recommendation to the Executive Committee doesn't need a second. Is there any questions about that? This is just sort of a temporary hold so that we can just begin our work. So all in favor of that, say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. All right, Brian, thank you.
Thank you. I was asked to give a presentation on legal deserts in the beginning of our study in this issues subcommittee. So in the issues committee materials, you'll see PowerPoint slides on legal deserts. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Good thing? No, I'm kidding. I can't pull it off as well as Catherine. No, you're not going to get out that easy. All right, so what I wanted to, what Darren asked me to do is just kind of give you an abbreviated version of what we talked about in June. We had our first subcommittee meeting, and we're looking at this idea of legal deserts. What are legal deserts? And really to even kind of take a step back, what are the popular active lawyers? So we started first by talking about rural and urban populations, and really what did we learn from the 2020 census? There's some interesting things in here. First and foremost, we see that the state of North Carolina has a map where they classify rural counties and urban counties. You can see here there's 70 rural counties, 30 urban counties in this state. A lot of the counties, you're probably looking at and saying, okay, I can understand that classification. Interesting thing happened with our population. North Carolina saw a 9.5% increase in population. It was one of the largest increases in the country. 9.5% increase in population from 2010 to 2020. However, during that same time, 51 of our counties decreased in population. All right, so we have big growth, but over half of our counties are actually losing population. You can see here, based on these different, the Census Bureau projects that North Carolina in 2035 is going to be looking at a 12.3 million person population. And as this trend continues, we're probably going to see the similar thing where counties are losing population, and we're wondering, well, we're seeing growth. Where's the growth occurring? As you can imagine, it's occurring in the big counties. You see Wake County, Mecklenburg County, Durham, Guilford, Cabarrus is growing. Sure, Jay is aware of that. Maybe it's because they're finding more people that look like me, like Jason. But nevertheless, you're seeing increase in population in the big counties. Where are you seeing the decreases? Well, this is a map that the school government put together based upon the Census Bureau's data, where you see a lot of the decrease occurring, particularly in the southeastern portion of the state, but it's kind of occurring in what we saw earlier in those rural counties. And we started wondering, well, if you see a decrease in population, is that indicative of a legal desert forming? Is that indicative of a legal desert already in existence? So what is a legal desert? We need to make sure we're all on the same page on this term. A legal desert is defined as a geographic area where there is less than one lawyer for every 1,000 residents. Okay, less than one lawyer for every 1,000 residents. This map that I put together is a map of all of our counties coded as far as where there are legal deserts. If you see a county that's red or orange, that's a legal desert. Counties that are in red are, I guess, what you call severe legal deserts. There's less than 0.7 lawyers per resident. The orange are 0.7 to 1, and so on. When you look at yellow is, of course, you can see those green counties. That's where the growth is occurring. Wake, Mecklenburg, Durham, Guilford, maybe not Cabarrus, but soon. But you see where our legal deserts exist. When you look at that comparison between that map I showed you earlier of the rural counties versus the urban counties, it's not a one-for-one sort of comparison, but you see where a legal desert is, it tends to be where we have a rural county. When we were starting to look at that population trend, we were talking about there's incredible growth in some areas, but there's decrease in these counties. This is some of the specific county breakdowns. You can't read all the different numbers, I'm sure, especially further in the back. But the general thing that we're seeing here is where you see a decrease in population in these counties, you also see a legal desert. The counties that are highlighted in red are our counties. There are a couple exceptional things. I think Johnson County was truly an exception because they've had an explosion of population, but they are, I guess, because of that explosion of population, not necessarily the lawyer population, but the general population, they technically qualify as a legal desert, though it may not feel like it's a legal desert. But again, you see a lot of decreases in population. That's where we currently have legal deserts. So, kind of with this framework, we start kind of impacting access to services. The committee was looking at these just kind of summary statistics. 48 of North Carolina's 100 counties currently qualify as a legal desert. 46.7, nearly 47% of the active in-state North Carolina lawyers are in two counties, Wake and Mecklenburg. Now the population that's in those two counties, just 21.5% of the total state population is in Wake and Mecklenburg, but those counties have nearly 47% of the lawyers. When you look at just the top 5 counties, Wake, Mecklenburg, Guilford, Durham, Forsyth, you're looking at 63% of the active in-state lawyers in North Carolina exist in 5 counties. And those 5 counties only account for 33% of the total state population. So what's that telling us? It's telling us that there's a lot of lawyers in really limited spaces. And you compare that to something like Harnett County. Harnett County, they have generally 1.3% of the total state population. They only have 0.4% of the total lawyer population. They are a legal desert. You see these sort of these trends developing, trends that are already here. And really the question the subcommittee first addressed was, legal deserts, is this a problem? Is this actually something that's impacting access to services? And I think the committee unanimously answered yes. I have to know something about the numbers, something that both Matt Smith and Tom Anglem observed, that the numbers that we have may actually overinflate the lawyer population, because we have a lot of folks that are retired, but they're still maintaining an active law license in some of these smaller communities. So when we, the state bar, we're pulling data, we will see that somebody, there might be a particular county that has 100 lawyers, but really only 70 of those lawyers are actually practicing. So the issue may actually be worse than these numbers even reflect. So what do we do about this? We recognize it's a problem. We recognize it's an access to services, access to justice issue. I remember Daryl Davidson was talking about how in Alexander County, I believe there are 2, maybe 3 people left on their court-appointed list. And it's impacting their citizens as far as being able to get the representation that they're constitutionally guaranteed. So what are other states doing? We don't need to necessarily reinvent the wheel here, because there are other states experiencing this too. North Carolina in that regard is not unique. There are legal deserts appearing all over the United States. And there's a number of different efforts, both national and statewide efforts underway. You see stuff like the Rural Justice Collaborative or the Legal Services Corporation and Equal Justice Works. That the latter one actually has essentially an internship program. They have funded this internship program where folks from across the country, law students from across the country, can apply for an internship with a legal aid provider, and they can essentially the Legal Services Corporation will try to pair that intern with a particular program, maybe over in Pennsylvania, maybe they want to go to Maryland, but they'll have a nationwide reach. They're trying to increase access for these law students to have internships with legal service entities that are serving rural communities. There are state-specific programs in Arkansas, Georgia, Illinois, are focused in some part on getting law schools, getting into law schools, getting law students paired up with potential employment opportunities in rural areas. There's other programs that are focused on trying to plant new practices in these rural communities by offering financial incentives to new practitioners to set up an office, things of that nature. You really see that there's I think overall there's 5 different programs that are promoted by educational institutions. Students with potential employment opportunities in rural areas, you'll see those out of stuff like the University of Georgia, the University of Kansas, University of Nebraska has something. Illinois has something through both one of the law schools in there. I'm failing to remember exactly which one, but then they also have a program where they're focusing on planting lawyers in rural communities. The stipends that are offered, if you look at those slides there, I'm not going through every single program here today due to time constraints, but if you look into Issues Committee, agenda, you're going to see all the PowerPoint slides from the presentation. And you'll see that the stipends are, they're okay. Maybe some of them have $5,000 for a law student to spend a summer in a rural area. Maine has a good program where they're trying to pair up folks at the University of Maine School of Law with rural practitioners through a $5,000 or $6,000 stipend. There's another one, I believe Montana offers something like $1,800 in loan forgiveness, which I don't know is really serving as a significant incentive for folks to go out there and start their practice in the rural parts of the state. So they vary. I wanted to highlight one though that I thought was particularly interesting, South Dakota. South Dakota, when I was doing this initial research, I saw South Dakota appear in a number of different articles, a number of different blogs. People are talking about this one. They have a unique kind of collaborative push between the judicial system, the state bar, as well as the county, where a new lawyer would reside and open their practice. Essentially, these 3 entities get together and provide financial resources to 35% 2022, that would have been $16,793. So 35% has to be covered by the county, the state bar pays 15%, and the judicial branch will pay the remainder, essentially 50%. Again, it's these different creative ideas that serve parts of their state. So where we are at now, we are planning to engage first in a conversation with our law schools. We want to get the law school community involved in this. There's a lot more to explore. This is really just kind of scratching the surface as far as population trends, what's available, what else we can learn from other programs. We want to get some of these other programs in on our committee meetings, perhaps have them join us by video conference and tell us rural health is a great example. The medical profession has been focusing on this for a while. So again, we have a long journey to undertake here, but certainly if anybody wants to come along for the ride, you are welcome to attend the meetings, and we'll continue to provide updates. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you all may have. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Felt like it was important enough that we all have an opportunity to look at these numbers, because these numbers are astounding. And I believe in this body, and I believe in the lawyers in North Carolina. We're problem solvers. As lawyers, we're problem solvers. Here's a problem. Let's solve it. Let's solve it over the next, what I think is going to be another couple of years of us reviewing this. So, thank you for doing that, Brian. I really appreciate that. Again, if you want to join in either as a subcommittee member or you want to join some of these subcommittee meetings, please contact us. We want to get as many thoughts about these issues as we can. We're going to move next to the executive committee report. We'll transition here. Just a minute. We want to first take up the minutes of the council meeting of April 22nd, 2022. I hope you've had a chance to look at those. They're posted in SharePoint. I would ask that there be a motion to adopt those minutes at this point in time. Is there a second? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. I'll call upon President-elect Marcy Armstrong to give the financial report.
All right, so first of all, before the Finance and Audit Committee, the Executive Committee recommends approval of the financial statements for the second quarter.
We have a recommendation from the Finance and Audit Committee. No need for a second. Anybody have any questions with regards to that? All in favor with adopting and accepting the financial statements for the second quarter, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
It's also a recommendation for approval of Ryan McGee with Bernard Robinson and Company as the accountant in charge of the 2022 audit.
All right, there's a recommendation from Finance and Audit Committee. Recommendation. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
There's also a recommendation from the Executive Committee for the adoption of the personal observance leave policy, which is in your materials.
All right, those that were posted in your materials, anybody have any questions with regards to the personal observance leave policy? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Move on to the Appointments Committee at this point.
For the Board of Legal Specialization, there's a recommendation to reappoint Matthew Ledenheim, to appoint John Bircher, and to appoint Julie Reeves as members of that specialization board.
I'm sorry.
Julie Beavers. I'm sorry, I can't read my own writing. Julie Beavers. I apologize.
From Lawyers Mutual, so.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So recommendation to the Appointments Advisory Committee. Does anybody have any questions with regards to those individuals who are being tendered as appointments? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
It's also a recommendation for the appointment of Jan Pritchett as chair and Matthew Ledenheim as vice chair of the specialization board.
All right. Again, another recommendation from the Appointments Advisory Committee. Does anybody have any questions with regards to those appointments? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
Next, for the IOLTA Board, there's a recommendation to reappoint Shelby Benton and Heather Culp, and to appoint Alexander Dale as members of the Board of Trustees for IOLTA.
Any questions with regards to those recommendations of the Appointments Advisory Committee? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
It's a recommendation also for the IOLTA Board of Trustees, Chair Shelby Benton and Vice Chair Heather Culp.
Again, a recommendation from the Appointments Advisory Committee. Does anybody have any questions with regards to those individuals? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Final item is the ratification of the President's reappointment of David Addison to the Inmate Grievance Resolution Board.
That appointment has already, what happens is the President makes a recommendation to the Governor appoints that individual to that board. The Governor has appointed that individual. We just need to ratify that so that I can now tell the Governor to get okay. But anyway, anybody have any questions with regards to ratifying that appointment? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
That's the report.
Thank you. Move to the next item on the executive committee, deals with the apportionment of at-large counselor seats. Does anybody have any questions with regards to this? What essentially we have to do is every 6 years, we have a certain number of at-large, I think it's 16, is that right? Yes. At-large. We have each judicial district is assigned one counselor, and then there are 16 at-large counselors that are provided for by statute. Those at-large are proportioned according to lawyer population, the best we can do. At this point in time, the recommendation based on a formula that has been used in the past that Peter so graciously went through, it looked like a word problem with the 5th grade, to be honest with you. But the next is Burke County, which is District 26, would be gaining a counselor, and Winston-Salem District 31 would be losing a counselor. Now, at present time, Winston-Salem has 2 counselors. Kevin Williams would be the individual seat who would expire at the end of his seat, so we don't get to kick him out right now if you vote this way, but his seat would expire, and then George Whelan, who is the other counselor from the Foresight, he would continue on as normal with his term. But Kevin's term expires 2024, I believe, is that right? So once 2024, we would essentially be carrying an extra counselor for those next 2 years. So that is the recommendation of the executive committee based on the apportionment calculation and formula that we have applied in the past. Does anybody have any questions with regards to that? I think that's going to give Wake County 8, and it's going to give Mecklenburg County will now have 8 counselors. Any questions? Recommendation from the executive committee, so no further action needs to be with regards to questions. All in favor of apportioning that extra seat to Mecklenburg and withdrawing that seat effective 2024 to Foresight, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Could we, you need to know who opposed or not?
Well, you have to decide whether they got it back.
I think I'm going to call it, I think it was a unanimous vote. Does anybody object to that?
Not unanimous, just passed.
Not unanimous, but I think it's a majority. Okay. All right, anybody feel like we need to call a vote on that further? Thank you. next want to move into proposed amendments to the rules of professional conduct, which were published during the last quarter. The first one that I want to call your attention to is the rules governing continuing legal education. There have been some alterations to that particular amendment or those rules. We received comment during the quarter, and Peter has taken that back to the Continuing Legal Education Board committee, that we republish not just the modifications, but that we republish all of the rules with the modifications, so that the memberships can provide further comment. I would tell you that there was a modification in the executive committee with regards to the original rules, which would exempt counselors, bar counselors from CLE requirements. That has been removed. So what is before you is publishing the rules as they had been stated, with modifications provided by the CLE board, and also with this modification from the executive committee, removing the exemption of bar counselors from CLE credit. I think it'd be very difficult for us to go back to our judicial districts and explain why we shouldn't be subject to CLE credits. So does anybody have any questions with regards to the motion that we republish those rules? All right. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? With regards to two rules with regards to adoption today, to be sent to the Chief Justice. One rule is the proposed amendments to the rules governing paralegal certification. Those are in your materials. I hope you had an opportunity to look at those. The other one is proposed amendments to the rules of professional conduct, 1.9 or 1.19. If you recall, that is the rule that came out of the Ethics Committee work regarding inappropriate communications with clients. Essentially, I referred this to as sort of the sexting, where you text explicit information to a client or pictures. That activity was not covered by the rules of professional conduct. So the Ethics Committee did a great job of trying to parse through that rule to create a situation where we can now regulate that conduct that should not occur. So these two amendments are on, for the rules, are on for adoption at this point in time. Those amendments, if adopted, will be sent to the Chief Justice for his approval. Does anybody have a question about either one of those amendments or want to pull one of them for discussion? All right, seeing none, I'm going to take them as a group. All in favor of adopting the proposed rules for changes to the paralegal certification program and to Rule 1.19, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. The following rules are being recommended by the Executive Committee for publication. Again, these are in your materials. The first one is a proposed amendment to the discipline and disability rules. That one dealing with the effect of finding of a guilt in any criminal case and how that affects an attorney's position with the state bar. Proposed amendments to the rules of administrative reinstatement, proposed amendments to trust accounting rule, and proposed technical corrections to the rules of professional conduct that have to do with some language or misspellings that were placed in. We also have a proposed amendment with regards to discipline and disability rules. Again, those materials were in your SharePoint file. Does anyone want us to pull any of those 5 recommendations? Or then we would take up items A, B, C, D, and E of the amendments that are proposed for publication, and I would call on a vote. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you. That's the report of the executive committee. At this point in time, I would now recognize Rich Costanza to bring us the administrative committee report. Rich.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning. The administrative committee met on Tuesday, and we granted 64 members in active status, 7 upon meeting certain requirements, 5 members were granted in active status for Wisconsin, and 1 member was granted pro bono emeritus status. 22 members were reinstated from inactive status. 2 members, their reinstatement was conditioned on lap compliance. 1 member was granted pro bono out-of-state status. Excuse me, one lawyer was granted pro bono status. The committee recommended that 933 members receive show causes for non-payment of state bar fees. We will probably receive in the next several weeks an updated list of members that would benefit from a phone call to just remind them of their obligations to pay state bar dues. The committee recommended the adoption of a rule change that is specific as to federal judges. Apparently you can but if you are inactive for 7 years or more, you have to sit for the bar exam again. And the committee is asking the council to adopt a rule that would exempt federal judges from having to take the state bar exam if they are inactive, but still actively hearing cases during their inactive status. And with that, I'll answer any questions if there are any.
That rule that Rich talked about was already voted on in the last procedure with regards to publishing it, so that will be published. Do I have a motion to accept the administrative committee report? Second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you. Andrea, come on up. We'll next take the report of the authorized practice committee.
Good morning. So the highlights of the authorized practice committee are as follows. We had 11 letters of caution, 4 matters were dismissed, 1 was continued, and 4 submitted for registration. We had 4 petitions that were accepted this quarter. We had 3 that are pending, and there was also a subcommittee that between last session and this session met, and I would like to thank them for their work. The subcommittee was chaired by Bobby Bowers, and Takia Lewis was on it, and Joe Johnson was on it. Savannah was the one who helped them get through this and their challenges, and they were asked to do the following. They were asked to look at the prepaid legal service plans and recommend 4 items. One was, should lawyers be able to own prepaid service plans? The committee recommended that lawyers should not be able to do so, and we voted to operate in a way that they can make referrals to lawyers who are not referrals to participants of referrals. That is something that I'm going to be asking the council to vote on today. They also looked at whether we should increase fees for applications, and they're recommending that we increase fees from $100 to $300 for the registration. And they also were asked to look at timetables. And Savannah, I have to confess, I like this wordsmithing, but they are asking to impose aspirational timetables to process applications. And if I can borrow that terminology, I'm going to go back to my office and impose aspirational timetables for my cases. And so they set those out. They asked us to bless them. We voted to bless their aspirational timetables. And the bottom line is, for purposes of today, they are requesting that the council take action on 2 of those 4 items. One is, in that the other 2 have already been approved by the committee and do not require council approval. So the 2 items for purposes of today are requesting the council to approve the increase of the annual fee registration from $100 to $300, and to amend the definition of prepaid plans to not allow the plan organizations to make referrals to attorneys who are not participating in the plan. So, Mr. President, we need council approval on those 2 items.
Okay, all right. I was just checking. One is a policy. The other one is a rule amendment. That need both. Well, the rule amendment has to be published. Policy doesn't necessarily, but I think the appointment or the authorized practice committee has asked us to publish it since it's an increase in fees. So the motion, recommendation from the authorized practice committee is to publish those 2 pieces of information, one being a policy, one being a rule. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Any questions with regards to those recommendations? All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you.
And there is no need to accept the report, so that's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Calling upon Judge Harrison Mitchell for the communications report.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I am here to give the report for the Communications Committee. We are continuing our ongoing efforts, or communications efforts. As you all know and are well aware, we have Peter and Brian and other State Bar staff that do a really great job of getting things out, getting information out about what the State Bar is doing and what the Bar Council is doing. Brian's presentation today is a great example of the types of presentations that they are giving across the state. You've already heard about Peter having gone out and done a lot of presentations on the new or the recommended amendments to the CLE rules. He's had to really answer some questions about that. And I'm really happy to know that when we get publish those things, that we get a lot of feedback. And it was really, really helpful for us in this regard, especially. We haven't done as much live streaming. As you all know, we haven't had the need to do a whole lot of live streaming because we've been able to meet in person quite a bit more. We are live streaming right now, but at last time I checked, we had, I think, 1 person, and it might be you, Peter, actually on there watching it, except for 2 when I went on there to check. But we do have 185 YouTube subscribers that went up from the other day. We only had 183 the other day. So at least get on there and subscribe to our YouTube page. But we are on social media, other social media platforms, which is really, really good. We heard some things from publications that we might get some more information and some articles and podcasts about TikTok. And I can't wait to get home and talk to my boys about that. They'll be happy to know that I might not be on the old lady status for too much longer, because I might be on TikTok a little bit more. Not that embarrassed, well, I probably will embarrass them. But anyway, we are working on, well, we have our, as you all know, the new database and membership portal, which has gone over really, really well. The membership that we just went through this year was really, the new database was really good for that. Streamlined everything, as you all see, is much more user-friendly than what we had before. Peter did a good job of getting out that information and how to work that portal. And so we'll probably have more updates and more information that will come on there as well. We are working on some new software for meeting materials and our agendas. So those of you who are like, SharePoint is just too much, we will get some new software, and so we're working on that as well. We are also working on a message map we're forming a message map subcommittee to work on message map, which will include more ways and more effective ways to get information out to our members and across the state. And I want to leave you all with this. I just want to give a special shout out, not only to Brian and Peter and all the other State Bar staff that really does a good job of getting our information out, but to Lenise and Caroline, who worked so hard on keeping us together and getting information out. And I just want to say thank you from here. And if we could all give them a unsung heroes that keep us all together, and especially when we're all running around and doing things at the different meetings. I saw Caroline the other day. I was like, have you actually gotten up from that seat? She was like, I think I have. I was like, get some steps in or do something. So I just want to give you all that thank you. And that is my report.
Thank you. The immortal words of past President Gray Wilson, we may need something bold and wet to get our live stream up, I guess. So if you are want to volunteer for the bold and wet requirement, come on. Evan, come on up, sir. Evan's going to give us.
Good morning, everybody. The Ethics Committee met yesterday, and once again, it was impressive in the way that we're able to look at issues that present themselves from all sides. And the whole committee can see things that individuals cannot. We started with the trust account report, and the trust account, the percentages of compliance are well above what we've been averaging the last quarter. So we're getting the message out. Suzanne noted that we had 997 ethics inquiries, which once again is one of the best features of the State Bar. Lawyers can call and get guidance. And Brian and Nicole presented 5 CLEs during this last quarter. We had 2 matters that were sent to subcommittee, 2 interesting matters that are going to be really in the front windshield. Overlapping billing. That is, can you double bill? And this has gotten into a pretty nuanced discussion about billing practices. But that was referred to subcommittee, and we will be interested in looking at what they come back with. And also we got some comments from the opinion that we published and decided to send that to subcommittee. The second issue is also one that's facing the lawyers of my generation. And that is what to do with the sale of law practices and agent-client files. And this is also an issue that has a lot of depth and nuance to it, and a lot of rule provisions that apply. We did send one proposed ethics opinion out for publication. We have 2 proposed rule amendments for publication that have to do with trust account stuff. No substantive changes, but we'll get some comments back on that. We do have 2 issues for the council. We have proposed FEO number 2, which is limited representation in a criminal matter, and proposed 2022 FEO3, which is inclusion on allied professional list of preferred lawyers. These materials are in your materials at the end of your materials. And I'd like to take them together and move that we adopt those 2 FEO.
All right, it comes from the Ethics Committee. Does anybody have any questions about one or both of those FEOs? This is for adoption. All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Call upon Matt Smith for the grievance report.
Good morning. I won't bore you with all the numbers, but I would address that the grievance committee took up 217 matters this quarter, and only 16 of them will either be DHC or public discipline, which means the lawyers are acting right for the most part. So we did some fine work there. As usual, staff council does a great job, and I want to thank them. Particularly Heather. Is Heather in the room? Where's she gone? Heather Ruth is, if you look at her email, her title is Director of Logistics. Think about that. Director of Logistics for this group. That takes a lot of work. Also, very briefly, and we passed the rules earlier, most of you may have heard that we had a grievance review panel that was done through the legislature. In short, if you receive public discipline, either a reprimand or a censure, you have the opportunity to have a review panel, so to speak, go behind and see if there's any additional evidence or things of that nature. And then they can come back and take a look at it and remand or do something different. So we're happy to answer any questions on that. But it was something that we spent a lot of time on. Thank you. Any questions?
Questions? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Mike Ramos, you come up and give the LAMP committee report.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. The LAMP committee met yesterday, and for the first time in the 2.5 years, it looks like we're going to be able to put our world-renowned CLE on October 28th at the law school at Chapel Hill. We've been unable to do it for the past 2 years because of COVID, of course, and this is contingent upon nothing else breaking out, but that's what it looks like right now. We're putting together the speakers and the subjects. This is important because this is one of the only law. And if you ever want to have, if you have a sinus infection and you want to get your sinuses cleared out, come and listen to Mark Sullivan talk about the equitable distribution of military pensions sometime. So that's set up. We hope it'll go. I was told, to make it even more attractive, that Carolina plays Pitt the next day on Saturday. Now, I don't know why that matters, because everybody knows ACC football doesn't matter. University of Georgia, 1970. During the course of our meetings, we always meet with the commands at Fort Bragg and Camp Lejeune. I don't know if y'all know it, but North Carolina, of course, is home to probably the largest military population in the country. Maybe Texas, but I think we're pretty close. And Fort Bragg, with the staff judge advocates at those institutions, and it appears, we met with Captain DeSantos from the 18th Airborne Corps at Fort Bragg. She's the head JAG officer there at Fort Bragg and 18th Airborne Corps. And it appears that legal deserts are not confined to the civilian world. She reported us, and she's a captain that probably should be headed by a colonel, or at least a lieutenant colonel. And she is the senior legal advisor there at 18th Airborne Corps. She's only been there 7 months. Due to a number of reasons, she is down to like 2 or 3 young lieutenants, second lieutenants, just been licensed. So we volunteered. A couple of our members, Lee Bachman, who practices family law there in Fayetteville, and Mark Sullivan, of course, who's out of Raleigh, who is the man as far as family law goes. They volunteer because a lot of their questions are family law questions that they get from their young troops. And I can't answer them, that's for sure. I don't practice family law. I found it's much easier for me to talk someone into a life sentence than to giving up a flower pot from Walmart. But they have graciously agreed to be on call for these young folks. So if they get questions that they can't answer, that our members are going to be there for them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. Mr. Savage, if you'll come up for the Distinguished Service. And I'm anticipating a motion.
You are. Thank you, Mr. President. At this time, I'd like to move to go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.111A2. I think I know that by heart by now. Of an honorary degree, scholarship, prize, or similar award.
That would be a motion. Do we have a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Ready.
Mr. President, the committee is moving with the approval of the executive committee that the council approve the nominations of the 2 lawyers, candidate A and candidate B, discussed in closed session for the presentation of the John B. McMillan Distinguished Service Award, subject to our standard due diligence checks.
Any questions? All right, this recommendation for the Distinguished Service Award doesn't need a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Thank you, Warren.
Thank you very much.
And Warren always asks if you get out into the weeds and find candidates, nominees to provide to them.
There's a couple of you I have talked to about moving forward on things that we've discussed sort of informally. I'd like
for vice president. So these will be formally voted on at our October meeting. So Alice and Matt better behave between now and then. I think the only contested election last year was that for the role of past president.
This year will change. I think Todd is a shoe-in. I think Alice will be a shoe-in. Matt, you need to work on it. Congratulations to Matt. We look forward to working with you, even though the Cubs suck. So anyway, is there any further business? Do you have anything else? You guys travel safe back to your home. Live back west, it's a long way. You live east or have a beach house, and it's not so far. So, thank you guys for all the work you do. We couldn't do this without you, and thank you. If you have any questions of the officers, please let us know. Thanks.